information about the Grant Informational Session. Chloe, would you mind pulling up the PowerPoint for us? And it's on presenter view so people can see the next slide. So maybe we could just quick switch it. Sorry, folks, just give us a minute to get ready. There we go. All right, so now we're ready to start the informational session. Again, I just want to thank everyone for joining us this morning. I know that you all have really busy days, especially in this crazy time with the winter storms, and I hope everybody braced that well, or is doing as good as can be expected from that. Today, I am joined by Alicia Krupski, our Field of Interest Program Associate, as well as Chloe Allison, our Program Assistant for Grants and Scholarships. And we are co-presenting today, and I'm excited for you to get to know them. Before we get started, I just want to share that a couple quick meeting hygiene things. One is if you could please have yourself on mute. It can be a little bit distracting when people get phone calls, so if you could please keep yourself on mute. Second is we have a lot of information that we're excited to share with you. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask during the presentation. You don't have to wait till the end to ask those questions. We only ask that if you do ask a question that you keep it globalized. So don't ask a question about your particular project or program, but ask the question in a way that everybody on the call can benefit from them, because chances are multiple people have a question about that. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Chloe, can you please move to the next slide? Okay, so here's what we will be covering today. We'll be giving an overview of the Community Foundation. And one of the reasons why we do this is we took a look at who was planning to join this workshop this morning. And there were a lot of organizations that are new to applying to the Foundation for Grants, which is great to see. So we'll be talking a little bit about the foundation, definitely going over our grant programs and priorities. Today, we're focused on the 2 grants that are now available, but we will have other grants available later on this year. We'll also be sharing information as to how to submit a successful application. Each year, we ask our committees for feedback on information that we can share with all of you that will help you be more competitive. So we take copious notes when we get that kind of feedback, and we want to share all of that with you so that way you can submit a strong application. And then we'll be talking about the application platform. We use Community Force as our online vendor to submit your application. We've been using them for about 8 years now. And every year they do a couple of quick updates on the platform that make it a little bit more user-friendly. So
Community Foundation is slow.
We will be going through that. And then lastly, I am excited to share with you that we are bringing back the breakout sessions. So at the end of the more formal part of the presentation, we will have 2 different opportunities for you to join a breakout session. One for each one of the grant programs that are available. So you'll have one option to join Women's Legacy Fund if you're interested in applying for that grant, another opportunity to join Jansen and for youth and youth sports. And this just gives you an opportunity to hear from the folks that make decisions on these grants about what they're looking for, to share project ideas and whatnot. Okay, so that's what we'll be doing this morning. All right, next slide, please. So again, we wanted to talk a little bit about the role of our Community Foundation and what we are exactly. So the Community Foundation was established in 1998 by a few community members that had the idea of creating a local safety net. They saw that when people passed away, their estates were often leaving the community and not supporting local nonprofits. And the Community Foundation was created to help address that. Since inception, we've granted over $60 million to the community, and over 90% of that has stayed local. So it stayed in San Luis Obispo County. We offer grants, which we'll be talking about today, and we also offer scholarships. This year is a very unique year for us as we're celebrating our 25th anniversary. So you'll be hearing more about the different ways that we're celebrating 25 years and different ways that you can participate. We are planning to have a series of different events across the county, and it can be a great opportunity to meet members of the foundation family. Okay, next slide, please. So one of the things that when I applied for grants or when I worked for a nonprofit before entering the foundation world, there was kind of this perception that community foundations were a little bit of a black box. So you submit your application and then what happens to it, who reviews it. There's the competitive grants that you can apply for, but then there's also these things called donor advised funds. What are they and how do they work? And so part of what we wanted to do today was to demystify how the community foundation works, who makes the decisions, and how funding works at the community foundation. So we have competitive grant rounds, which we are focusing on this morning by talking about how you apply, you compete with other nonprofits for that grant funding. But then there's also these things called donor advised funds. And if you're not familiar with donor advised funds, they're similar to charitable checking accounts that donors set up. So an individual could set up a donor advised fund with the community foundation. They get a tax deduction in the year that they establish that donor advised fund, and then they can make grants over the course of time. So at the community foundation, about half of our funding goes out through competitive grant rounds. So those are the ones that you can apply to. And another 50% goes out through non-application processes. So the question that grantees and nonprofits often ask is, how do I be able to engage with those donor advised fund holders? And so I wanted to share with you that we do this several different ways. There are two main ways. Is we often ask our donor advised fund holders to help contribute to the amount we have available to support and grants out to the community. So that's one way. Another way is often we aren't able to support all of the grants that people are applying to funding for, which is pretty heartbreaking because often it's just a wonderful project and we didn't have enough funding to be able to do that. And in those cases, your application actually gets forwarded to those donor advised fund holders. So when you apply for grants to the community foundation, it doesn't necessarily mean that we are the only ones that look at it. The committees, it can actually go out to some of those donor advised fund holders, and then they make decisions on whether or not they want to support them. So what we do is we really try and work across the foundation to help get as much funding out to the nonprofits as possible and inform our donor advised fund holders of the wonderful things that are happening within the grant applications that we're receiving. Okay, any questions about donor advised funds? I know that that's a little bit, there's a lot that I just talked about with that. And for me, when I was applying for grants before I started working in the foundation world, as I mentioned, it was kind of this like like unclear thing to me how you engage with that. So any questions on donor advised funds? Okay, not seeing any, so I'll keep going. Okay, next slide, Chloe. So today we're going to be focusing on two grant programs, and we'll be doing a deep dive into both. So the first is Women's Legacy Fund, and the second is Jansen Youth and Youth Sports. Grants are due on March 15th this year at 5 p.m. Chloe will be discussing what it looks like when you submit a grant application and how you know it's actually been submitted. So when she starts talking about the online application process and how it works, just make sure to bookmark how you actually submit an application. Then on the next slide, I wanted to also highlight that we have two grants that are available right now, but then the rest of the community foundation's grant programs will become available this summer. And this is providing us with a little bit more time to work with our donor advised fund holders to help increase the amount of grants that we're able to award this year. Probably will come as no surprise to any of you on this call, but the stock market was not so great last year. And so we're working with our donor advised fund holders to help increase the amount available. So that really shifted the timing for the majority of the other grants at the Community Foundation. So while I won't go into depth on these grant programs right now, I will just speak at a high level as to what they are, because chances are you might have a project that you're currently working on that could be a good fit for one of these grant programs. So I just wanted you to kind of flag what's coming up. So Access for All supports organizations that are increasing access for people with disabilities. And again, these are just headlines. Build, this supports nonprofits who have a budget of $500,000 or less with capacity building. Arts and Culture, Environment, Health and Wellness, and Seniors and People with Disabilities. Those are all grants that support those interest areas, and they're unrestricted, and they support 2-year grants up to $25,000. Growing Together, an LGBTQ fund. As you can probably gather from the title, it supports LGBTQ community members. Opportunity to Thrive supports nonprofits that have direct relief financial assistance for individuals in our community. And the Senior Dance Program supports music at senior dances. So those are just the quick headlines for those different grant programs. If you want to learn more about it, you can go to our website. We included a brief overview of each one of those different grant opportunities, and I by no means did them justice. So make sure to check out our website for those, but I did want you to know what's coming up. Next slide, Chloe. So one of the questions is who can apply? So programs must be benefiting San Luis Obispo County residents. So if you're a nonprofit that's in Santa Barbara, for example, you are eligible to apply for funding so long as the money is impacting San Luis Obispo County residents. Your organization must be either a 501c3 or have a fiscal sponsorship agreement in place. So if you're a 501c3, this means that you're registered both federally and through the state of California, and you're a nonprofit in good standing. If you have any questions about if you are a nonprofit in good standing, you can contact Chloe and she can help you see what that looks like. If you have not been approved by the state or the federal government as having a 501c3, you can partner with an existing 501c3 and apply using their 501c3 status. So for example, let's say that I was working on food outreach in San Miguel. What I could do is if I didn't have a 501c3, I could partner with an organization such as the Food Bank. There's mission alignment there. And we could create a memorandum of agreement saying that I can use their 501c3 in order to apply for grant funding. The responsibility of the 501c3 that loans their status to that non-official organization is that they're responsible for all grant funding. So we send the check directly to the 501c3. So in my example, the food bank, the food bank is required to ensure that I get all of the grant reports and any kind of due diligence. And so we don't actually have a working relationship with the fiscal sponsored organization. Our relationship is with the 501c3. In order to apply, you do have to have a memo of understanding submitted to the Community Foundation so we can see that there's agreement from both entities. There is not a place within the online application to submit the MOU. If you do have an MOU in place, please submit it to me, and we will make sure to send that to the committee. The reason why it's not part of the online application is because it would be a requirement for all people to submit this, and for 99% of our applicants, this is not something that they have to do because they have their own 501c3. Any questions about eligibility at a high level for that? Okay. A couple other quick things that I wanted to mention is that we do have some exclusions on what we can and cannot support. So when you go to the website to begin applying for a grant, make sure that you read through that information, and Chloe will be talking about how you see that. So a couple of examples of what we cannot support through our competitive grant writing is we cannot support fundraising or annual campaigns. We usually do not support indirect admin costs of over 15%. We cannot support religious organizations where you have to be of a certain religion in order to be able to access whatever services are available. If the religious organization is inclusive and it doesn't depend on religious affiliation in order to benefit from services, you are eligible to apply. And it also cannot go to support an endowment fund. Those are like 5 of the 20 different things on that list of things that we can't support. So just make sure to review that information. All right, so if there aren't any questions, I will go ahead and pass it off to Alicia, who will talk about Women's Legacy Fund. Alicia, feel free to take it away.
Okay, good morning, everybody. Chloe, thank you. So I'm here this morning to speak with you about the grant that's available through the Women's Legacy Fund. So first, I'll explain a little bit about what that is. The Women's Legacy Fund is an endowment fund. It was created by the Community Foundation in 2003. Their mission is to be a catalyst for philanthropy that improves the lives of women and girls in San Luis Obispo County. What's cool about that is that they're the only fund in SLO County that serves women and girls alone. The fund is managed by a wonderful volunteer advisory committee of 17 community members, and it's supported by over 400 donors. The fund has grown to $2 million. Now, the fund has granted over $500,000 to local organizations with programs that support women and girls in SLO County. Next slide, please, Chloe. Okay, what do women need report? This report is created by the Women's Legacy Fund, and it's a needs assessment report to identify the issues that are specifically impacting women and girls in San Luis Obispo County. Next slide, please. So this is an incredible resource for our grant applicants, and here's why. Not only does this report identify local need, but the findings of this report correlate directly to the grant funding priorities announced by the Women's Legacy Fund that helps the fund focus on what programs they want to support the most, that they see has the most need. Also, grant applicants that reference this report with their themes and with the data tend to have a more competitive application. So where do we find this report? Women's Legacy Fund has a brand new website, and you can find it at wlfslo.org. When you navigate to the home page, along the top to the right, click on resources. What do women need? Scroll all the way down, and you'll have a download the report button here. So that's where you can find it. Does anyone have any questions about the report before I move on to funding priorities? Okay, next slide, please. So these are the funding priorities for the Women's Legacy Fund for 2023. 3 areas of focus. First, girls' mental health. So examples of programs that support girls' mental health would be self-care, addressing chronic sadness, addressing bullying and harassment, and internet safety. The second priority is for women's financial stability. And examples of programs that support that would be in financial literacy and education, in economic independence, support for Latinas, income disparity, food security, senior support, and housing stability. The third priority that Women's Legacy Fund is focusing on funding this year is childcare. So some examples of childcare support is access for low-income families, expanded capacity and improvement for childcare facilities, and professional development for pre-K and preschool educators. Know that the maximum grant amount that can be awarded per year is $20,000. And if it's a 2-year program, the maximum can be $40,000. There are some best practices that we have around applying for a grant for 2 years. And I believe Cassandra will be speaking to that a little bit later in the program, right? Okay. Does anyone have any questions about the Women's Legacy Fund grants or grant application so far?
Hi, Alicia. This is Jenny Luciano at Big Brothers Big Sisters. Does childcare include after-school program type of services?
Yes.
Thank you.
Now we will be having a breakout session a little later in this meeting to answer more specific questions about the Women's Legacy Fund grant. And so I will pass it back on to Cassandra.
Great, thank you, Alicia. Okay, so next up, we wanted to share with you information about Jansen Youth and Youth Sports Fund. So it would be amiss if I did not talk a little bit about who Robert Jansen was and a little bit more about why the funding criteria is the way that it is. So Robert Jansen was a lifelong resident of San Luis Obispo City, and he was an active supporter of youth and community activities. It was said that he had an encyclopedic knowledge of both sports and anything that was civic related. And he was really a wonderful catalyst and supporter of youth sports during his lifetime. So after he passed away, the estate was able to start a private foundation, which had about $2 million, and they made grants over many, many years. And then in 2006, the board approached the community foundation and asked if we could partner to help increase the amount of grant applications that we were receiving or that they were receiving. So from 2006 to last year, we worked in that manner. And last year, the board of the Jansen Foundation decided to dissolve, so their assets were transferred over to the Community Foundation. I want to share that with you as several of the community members and board members that were part of that board still participate in the review process. They're very dedicated to the mission. And so some of them have a lot of knowledge about youth sports in our area, whereas other committee members, this might be the first time that they're reading a grant application about youth sports. So when writing your application for Jansen, just be mindful of, even if you've applied to this grant before, it could be the first time that some of the committee members have heard of your organization. So providing some of that context will be helpful. Okay, next slide. So Jansen Youth and Youth Sports. I'll talk about the Search Institute's 40th developmental asset on the next slide, but I wanted to share with you some of the insights that I've had from the committee members on what makes for a competitive application. One is for this application cycle, they're really looking at youth sports or allied activities. So when the fund was first established with the private foundation, all money went to youth sports. But then as the foundation, the Jansen Foundation, was around a little bit longer, they started to realize that sports weren't for all kids. And there are other allied activities that are similar to sports that mimic what they care about. So if you're a program that offers music classes or something like that, they understand that sports aren't for all kids and that there are other educational programming that provides some of the things that you get out of sports, such as teamwork and mentorship of an adult, different things like that. So they have since broadened what they support. So don't let the youth sports part of the name of this grant cycle hold you back from applying from this grant. I will say that they look very closely at the budget. So I will be describing a little bit later in the presentation how to formulate information regarding the budget. They also really care about width. So later on, I'll be talking about depth versus width. For this grant application, they're looking to support as many kids as possible. So, and sometimes when we do grant funding at the foundation, we'll talk about, do you support maybe it's 5 kids or a smaller population and it's really deep, or do you support lots of kids and maybe the support for them isn't as deep, but it's just a lot more in volume of people that are impacted by this grant. This grant in particular is really looking for width. How many kids can we support with this grant funding? I will also say, just by listening to the committee in the past, they're really looking for grant dollars to directly impact the student. So they aren't looking for support of the organization. They're looking for purchasing things like uniforms, different things like that to make whatever it is that the project is more accessible to youth. So this isn't necessarily true for all of the foundation's grants. I mentioned before, we have a whole grant program that supports unrestricted grant making to support organizations, but this one is really grants to support the direct impact of youth. So that's a key consideration for this grant round. The grants are up to $5,000. And on the next slide, actually, Chloe, can you push forward to that? I wanted to share with you what they look for. So as Alicia was mentioning with Women's Legacy Fund, the Community Foundation, all over our strategic plan, it talks about data-informed decision-making. This is one of the key things that we look for when we're evaluating grants is, what does the data say and what is the project doing to address a disparity in our community? So with this particular grant program, we're looking to the Search Institute's 40 developmental assets. This is a national framework, and it talks about how at different ages and different stages, there's some developmental assets in place that help students or youth be more successful. So if you're applying for a grant for Jansen, I would reference this direct report here, and you can see from this website how you download this report. It will also be on our website by the end of this week, so you can see it. And really it's linking, what is your project and how is it going to help with those 40 developmental assets? I highly suggest downloading this and referencing it in your application. This year in particular, because of the stock market, we have a little bit less money to give away. So organizations that draw that direct link between the data and what they're seeking to achieve will be more successful, and that might be a make it or break it for a lot of the applicants. So please make sure to take a look at that. And for Women's Legacy Fund, again, it's the What Do Women Need report. Okay, any questions about Jansen? Okay, just to flag, we will have 2 breakout sessions, one to talk about the Jansen Youth and Youth Sports Fund, and then another one to talk about Women's Legacy Fund, which Alicia had already mentioned. I'm excited that we have Emily, who's a member of Women's Legacy Fund Advisory Group, that will be part of that breakout session. We're thrilled to have her, so you'll be able to hear from one of the advisory committee members, and in fact, she's the chair, about what they're looking for in grant applications this year. Okay, let's go ahead and move forward. So next, I wanted to talk about tips for a successful application. So again, every single year when our committees meet, I ask them for feedback on how I can help all of you submit a successful application. And I realized just by looking at who's on this Zoom that some of you have been applying for grants for many, many years, whereas some of you, this might be your first time, not just applying for a grant for this organization, but could be your first time doing grant writing in general. So my goal here is to have it just share information with all of you that all of you can have some key takeaways from. So if some of it's remedial, I apologize for that, but there's probably some people that are benefiting from that information. So first, let's talk about the narrative. So as you guessed it, the first thing that's on this list is it's data informed. I think I hammered that home, but both of those reports you can find on the website. Alicia had mentioned there's a new website that is available for Women's Legacy Fund, and then where you can gather the information for the 40 developmental assets. And this is really evergreen at the foundation. So if you're applying for grants later this summer, again, also data informed. Second up is the grant maker is a good match. So one of the things that we look for when we're evaluating grants is this mission creep for the organization? So is the organization bending themselves into a pretzel in order to apply for our grant funding? If that happens, we're going to be not as excited to support the organization because we don't want to do any harm to the organizations that are applying. One of the other things that we look for is that the applicant has credibility. I remember a long time ago, I was reviewing a grant and one of the applicants wanted to provide youth therapy. And this became problematic because none of the staff had the credentials to provide therapy. So we ended up declining that grant. So in this case, when you're applying for grant, talk about how your organization's positioned to be able to do this work. If you've done this work in the past, maybe explain some successes that you've had. If this is a new program, talk about how your organization is positioned to be able to do this work well. And this really ties into good planning is evident. So we want to know, how is this going to work? What are the milestones that you anticipate crossing that will help you know whether or not the program is being successful? And then the last one that we wanted to share with you is that the highest level of governance in the organization is committed to the project. So this is particularly helpful if this is a new project. So if you're a sport-serving organization and you run a basketball program every year, this is going to be less important. However, if you're applying for a grant and this is a new project that you're taking on, we are looking for the organizational level support to make this happen. Any questions there? A couple of other things that I'll offer, and I think Emily will probably talk about this a little bit more in her breakout group, is that I talked about who reviews the grant applications for Jansen. All of our reviewers have experience reviewing grants at some extent. So that at least one or two of the committee members have read grants for the foundation in the past. Usually there's one or two reviewers who have not read for grants for the community foundation. So they may be a little bit less familiar with what it is that you're seeking to do. Or they might be members of the community that have expertise on the community's needs, but might not have expertise on the particular thing that you're applying for funding for. So my recommendation here is in the narrative, make sure to keep the information you provide accessible. So try not to use a lot of jargon. Think about this as if you were to have a family dinner and you're talking about a cool project that you were working on, using that kind of accessibility of the language. So you're not going to get into jargon or anything like that. You're just going to be telling your story. So that's really the tone that we're looking for in these applications. Okay, next slide. So what makes a good project? You'd be surprised, but well-defined is the first thing that our committee members talk about. a lot of times they'll read an application and they'll finish reading it and they'll go, it sounds interesting, but I have no idea what the ask is for, or I have no idea what it is that they're doing. So make this abundantly clear. If you can summarize what it is that you're doing in one sentence at the beginning of your application and then break into the details, that can be helpful. So make sure that it's well defined what it is that you're seeking to do. Often we have no idea what organizations are actually doing in their project until we read the budget, and that helps us piece together what's happening. So well define what it is that you're seeking to do. We also like to see that there is an unmet need. So how is what you're doing helping meet that need? And again, you can really tie that with data. I talked a little bit earlier about case making for depth versus width. So again, Jansen Foundation really cares about serving as many youth as possible. But this isn't necessarily true for Women's Legacy Fund. What they might be looking for is more case making. So why, if we grant you X amount of dollars, is it only impacting 5 kids? Like, what is the case making for how this is going to be transformational? Or what is the case making for why you're serving 100 kids and how is this going to be impactful? So drawing the case making and explaining that can be really helpful, because as a committee member, you're going to be holding up 2 of those different applications and thinking like, okay, I'm going to be supporting 5 kids with $10,000, or I'm supporting 30 kids with $10,000. Why will one decision be better than the other? So that's what the reviewers are charged with making decisions on. So if you do that case making for them, it will help your application be more competitive. The not too large in scope, manageable. So from time to time, we get an application that is going to change the world, not just in San Luis Obispo County, but they're going to change the world with $5,000. And while that's super inspiring, we know that $5,000 is probably not enough funding to be able to truly change the world. So what we're looking for is scope. With the amount of dollars that we're able to do, is it actually possible to accomplish what you want to do? So we're trying to make sure that going to the next piece of this, it's reasonable, it's grounded in reality. We too want to change the world, but drawing a link between the scope of the project and what's likely to happen. Again, you have the skill, expertise to lead or carry out what it is that you're seeking to do. Less important if this is a sports application and you have coaches that have been in place for many, many years. More important if it's a new project, to draw that line between how your organization's positioned to carry out this new body of work. Any questions about this before we move on? Okay. Next, we'll talk about the budget. So there's 4 different components that are required for your budget. So we'll have the proposed project budget, abbreviated financial statement, organization's operating budget, and then a list of major and current sources of funding. The last one is where people get the most stuck. We are not asking you for a list of all of your individual donors. That's probably private information that we shouldn't have access to. What we're looking for is more of a high level. So how do those funding streams work? So maybe there's 10% comes in from individual donations, 20% from foundations, that type of breakdown. So again, we don't need to see every donor that you have. And I will be talking a little bit more about the proposed budget and our templates as well. So Chloe, can you go ahead and move forward? So this is the proposed project budget. Chloe will be sharing how to download this template in just a little bit, but we do have a template that's available to you. If this template doesn't work, you can modify it any way that you want. I would just try and keep the general items similar to this. Last year, for some of our grant programs, people got pretty creative and were creating pie charts and all sorts of different things. We're not looking for that. We really just want item, expense, and where it's coming from. So no fancy charts, please. Let's see. And One of the things that I will mention that tie between budget and narrative is because our pool of funding is a little bit smaller this year, it can be helpful to share with us if partial funding was offered, would it be helpful, or in order to finish and complete the project, do you need full funding? So that is just another thing that I wanted to double click on. And next slide. This is the list of major sources of funding for the particular project. So we want to see funder, the amount for this year, if it's secured or if it's pending. It's helpful for us to know when we're reviewing grant applications of what's already been secured versus what might be coming through the queue. It could be applications that you've already submitted to other funders. It could be a grant application that you anticipate applying to. It is rare that we will fund a project where the community foundation is the only funder. It's not a requirement, but I will say it's rare. And part of that is that we're really looking at community energy. If we have multiple folks supporting a project, that can show that it has support from the community. Again, this isn't a requirement. Sometimes you need seed funding in order to start a new project, and there's case making for that, but it is something that we look at. Alicia had mentioned for Women's Legacy Fund that 2-year grants are available. So actually, Chloe, I'm going to ask you to go back to the previous slide if you wouldn't mind. So if you are applying for a 2-year grant, I wanted to share with you some of the things that make an organization more competitive for a 2-year grant. So Jansen, this is not part of that conversation because they're one-time grants of $5,000, but Women's Legacy Fund offers 2-year grant. What I've noticed is that if you're applying for a 2-year grant, there usually needs to be some case making as to why a 2-year grant is required in order for the program to succeed. So often this could be that it's a new project that the organization is wanting to take on because the data is showing that there's this huge need out in the community and nobody's tackling it. The organization wants to do something to really move the needle. So since it's a new bubbling up project, it could be that the first year is more in programmatic design, trying to figure out what this could look like. Maybe it has some implementation that happens in year 1, but really it's a 2-year investment to help get it off and help the program thrive. So applying for a 1-year grant could almost do harm to the organization because you really need that 2-year period. So that's really what Women's Legacy Fund is going to be looking at, is like, is the 2-year grant really necessary? So make sure to include that in your narrative, do your case making, make it easy for the reviewers because they're going to be trying to figure that out when they're reviewing grants when they come together. Okay, Alicia, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Nope, you said it perfectly.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, any questions about Women's Legacy Fund or Jansen before we go into the online grant application? Okay, I will go ahead and pass it off to Chloe. Again, Chloe is our program assistant and she will guide you through how to apply for grants utilizing our online application format, which is called Community Force. So when you hear the word Community Force, it's the name of our online application. And Chloe, I'll let you go ahead and take it away.
All right. Hi, I'm Chloe. As Cassandra mentioned, I'm the new program assistant here at the foundation. I'm really excited to be here. I'm new to the Central Coast and I really like working here. The world's really big and scary, so it's really nice to see how communities come together to help the people who need it. I'm going to be using this laser pointer. And if you have any questions that you don't want to interrupt to ask, go ahead and throw them in the chat and I can address them. All right, so the online application. So if you go to our website, cfslowco.org, up here you will see the nonprofits tab and you'll want to click on available grants. All right, and then so this is what our new grant page looks like. It says grant opportunities, and right here it says where you can attend this virtual information session here. Just FYI, after this session, hopefully by the end of the week, instead of the Zoom sign up page, we'll have a link to this recorded session and a link so you can download this PowerPoint here for your own personal reference. Or if you missed the session, you can check it out. So you're going to want to click right here for apply for a grant. And it's going to take you to a new website, which is the Community Force website. And right here, you see the program is blue. That's a link. If you go ahead and click on that, you can learn a little bit more about the grants, get a full description, and it'll list the eligible activities and the exclusions. So you want to make sure you review that and don't submit a grant report for a project that can't be funded. And when you're ready to apply, you click apply over here. And yeah, we did begin accepting applications last week. And here is the program deadline. It is March 15th, 2023 at 5 p.m. Does anyone have questions about that before I keep going? All right, great. All right, so here, once you click apply, it'll prompt you to either log in or create a new account. If you've already made one before, just go ahead and log in. If you've forgotten your password, please just either hit forgot password or email me and I can reset it for you. And if you're a new applicant, you'll need to create a new account and it'll link to your email address. So for organizations that have had like maybe a personnel change in who manages your grants, there is a way to add a new user, which I'm going to go over now. So to add a new user, if you come over here, so you're logged in and then go to manage members, you can click on that and then manage members will lead you here where you can see that's me right there. And then if you go create user, you can actually create a new user with their name and their email, and you can assign the password within this portal, send them an email, make them active and make them the primary user. And kind of the good thing about this is if you do have the login for your organization's previous applications, you can make the new account and then make your new email the primary user and kind of deactivate the previous one so that you'll be the new contact person for the grant applications so that it's easier for us to reach out to you and it's easier for you to find it. And if you can't access this, please send me an email. It's very easy for me to work on our end. Really, if you have any technical difficulties regarding the application process, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm pretty tech savvy when it comes to the Community Force website. And if I don't know the answer, I can definitely find someone who does. Any questions about creating a new account or adding a new user? All right. So once you click on, if you log in, create a new account, it'll bring you to the dashboard for the application. So this is my application for the Women's Legacy Fund. Did a practice one. So here is the applicant information. It's just the general information regarding the applicant and your organization. Yeah, so just fill that in, make sure you have all the right names and active email addresses, make sure that's 100% complete. Then is the program narrative, as Cassandra touched on earlier, and the specific program details. This part's a little bit important. There are word limits. There's a word count at the bottom, and be sure you don't go over that. You won't be able to submit if you exceed the word count, and we don't want exceeding a word count to hold you back on your application. There's required attachments, and including the budget, outlines, and funding sources that I'll go into a little bit more on the next page. And then there's the terms and conditions statement here, and that needs to be filled out and completed before you submit your application. And Last year, we did have someone complete the grant application, but not press submit. And that led to their application not being forwarded on to committee. So it's very important for you to fully submit your application, and you will get an automated email letting you know it's complete and submitted. And if you don't get this email, please contact me so we can kind of troubleshoot the problem before it's too late. All right, I'm going to go into the required attachment and templates. So here I'm on the Women's Legacy Fund. First up is the uploaded proposed project budget. If you click right here, it'll open up the PDF of the proposed budget template, and you can go ahead and fill that out in whatever PDF editor you use or Excel, and then just go ahead and upload it here. The abbreviated organizational operating budget goes here. You'll need a current list of board of directors for your organization, and then the list of major and current sources of funding. And again, that template is right here. Just click on it and fill it out and get it re-uploaded. And another important thing to hopefully prevent issues going forward is all these documents must be uploaded as a PDF. We only accept a PDF. And on the next slide, I'll kind of go into how to quickly save as a PDF. All right, any questions about the required attachments? All right, cool. All right, so to save as a PDF, this is Word. A lot of people use Microsoft. We use it here. So you just go to File, and then down here, go to Print. And then here, Print, you go down to whichever PDF editor or software you use. We use Foxit here, but you can do Adobe, even the Cute PDF writer. And then you're just going to save it and make sure the file type is PDF. And name it as something that you can easily remember and find. And then you can just easily upload it to the required attachments page on the grant application. All right, next up, we have navigating your applications. So let's say I'm in the Women's Legacy Fund application, and I'd like to go, I've saved all my work, and now I'd like to go and check on my other applications. Here in the top left, you click My Applications, and it'll take you to this page here. So it shows you which applications you've applied for, what your program name is, the date submitted if you've submitted it, the deadline, and your status. So if you've started it, the status will say pending. And once it's fully submitted, it'll change to submitted. Here you can download a PDF of your in progress or completed application. And here you can see which user in your organization owns the application if you're collaborating on them or want to make sure you don't complete 2 applications for the same program. And one more to touch on up here, it's the auto save timer. If you're inactive on Community Force for 10 minutes, it's going to go ahead and auto save for you so you don't lose your work, which I find that feature very, very helpful. And you want to just go ahead and keep track of that and just save as you go so that you don't lose the work you've been on. All right, so I'm about to pass back over to Cassandra. Are there any questions regarding the technical side of the online application portal? Nice. All right.
Okay,
Cassandra's going to go back into it.
perfect. Thank you, Chloe. So again, before we wrap up here and go into breakout sessions, applications are currently available and they are due March 15th at 5 p.m. We'll be doing notification in late May. And we usually send out an email before sending out award letters. So keep an eye out for an email in late May. Can you go to the next slide, Chloe? Who to contact? So I have the pleasure of working with these 2 amazing humans. So if you have questions about the technical side of the application process, Chloe is the person to reach out to. She knows our online platform better than anyone else. If you email either Alicia or I about technical issues, we will promptly be forwarding it to Chloe because we know that she'll get you the accurate information that you need. So you can just bypass emails getting forward and just reach out to Chloe directly with those questions. If you have questions about Women's Legacy Fund, Alicia is the primary staff person that works the closest with Women's Legacy Fund. She would be the person to reach out to about any questions that you have about that fund in particular. Jansen Youth and Youth Sports, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about eligibility or want to talk maybe and brainstorm about a different project that you're working on. Feel free to reach out to me. So this is our contact information. You can also find our contact information on the website. I know for myself, I usually get back to people a little faster via email. So if you do have a question, email is the best way to contact me. And I think that that's probably true for Alicia as well. Chloe is standing by the phone, ready to answer any questions via phone or via email at any point. Okay, next slide. Next, we're going to go into breakout sessions. So I'll be going into the Jansen Youth and Youth Sports. Emily, the chair of Women's Legacy Fund Advisory Committee, and Alicia will be in the breakout session for Women's Legacy Fund. In a few moments, you'll be prompted with a choice of which of the two sessions to attend. Again, I know it's hard because you can't be in two places at once. So if you have any questions and you chose not to go into a particular breakout session, you know who to contact if you have any questions there. It's a real privilege to be able to share all this information with all of you. So thank you for sharing your morning with us, and we hope you found this information helpful. You can now go ahead and join the breakout rooms. It should pop up on your screen. Oh, would you mind stopping the recording?